why the ruthless always win, the dark Darwinian truth, let me ask you a question that most people are too afraid to answer honestly. What if everything you were taught about morality, fairness, and kindness is only half the story? And what if the other half, the part no one talks about openly, is the part that dominates the world? We grow up hearing that good people win in the end, that being kind and noble will bring us success, and that justice always finds its way. But if you look around, really look, you'll notice something disturbing. The people who rise to the top of the food chain, the ones who accumulate wealth, power, influence, and control, are often not the kindest. They are not the most generous. They are not the most thoughtful. They are the most ruthless. And this is not a glitch in the system. It's the system itself. Nature doesn't reward virtue. It rewards fitness. And fitness, in a Darwinian sense, isn't about being the best. It's about being the best adapted to the environment. In a world that runs on competition, scarcity, and survival, ruthlessness becomes a kind of evolutionary advantage. The lion doesn't apologize to the gazelle before the kill. The virus doesn't feel guilt for infecting its host. And in human societies, those who are willing to do what others won't, cut corners, lie, manipulate, dominate, often end up in positions of power. Not because they're evil, but because they're effective. And that's the dark truth most people never want to admit. Success and morality are not intrinsically linked.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound insights.
Now, before you think I'm here to glorify cruelty, let me be clear, I'm not saying ruthlessness is good. I'm saying it works. And if we want to live wisely, we can't just operate on ideals. We have to operate on reality. If you ignore the truths of the world because they're uncomfortable, you're just setting yourself up to be outplayed by those who don't. This is the brutal wisdom that many heroes in history had to learn the hard way. Idealism without strategy is a beautiful way to lose. So why does ruthlessness win? First, because it doesn't hesitate. The ruthless act while others are still debating. They seize opportunity while others are waiting for permission. They say what needs to be said, even if it offends. They do what needs to be done, even if it hurts. And in a world that rewards speed, certainty, and decisiveness, this gives them an edge. While kind-hearted people are often trapped in overthinking, second-guessing, and trying not to hurt feelings, the ruthless are already 5 moves ahead. They understand something most people don't. Life isn't fair, and expecting it to be fair is the first step to losing. Second, ruthlessness creates fear, and fear is power. In any social system, whether it's a classroom, a company, or a country, fear organizes people faster than love. It's primal. It's immediate. It bypasses reason. The ruthless know this. They understand that by demonstrating dominance, they can control not just behavior, but perception. They can shape narratives. They can define reality. And once they've done that, they don't need to fight anymore. Everyone else does the fighting for them. You might say, but isn't that unsustainable? Don't the ruthless eventually fall? Sometimes, yes. History is full of tyrants who were eventually overthrown. But before they fell, they reigned. Their reigns were long, brutal, and effective. And during those reigns, they shaped nations, movements, empires. That's not failure. That's victory with an expiration date. And for many, that's more than enough. Because most people aren't trying to live forever, they're trying to win while they're here. Now here's the critical part. Ruthlessness doesn't always look like a dictator or a criminal. Sometimes it wears a suit, sometimes it smiles. Sometimes it donates to charity and gives TED Talks. Because the most effective kind of ruthlessness is invisible. It doesn't scream, it whispers. It integrates itself into systems, into culture, into language. It becomes normalized. We start to admire it. We call it drive, ambition, being a shark. And before we know it, we're applauding people who built entire empires on the silent suffering of others. This is why I believe we need to stop pretending that the world rewards goodness. It doesn't. The world rewards results. And if you're not willing to understand this, if you continue to believe that virtue alone will carry you, you're not just naive, you're vulnerable. You'll be outrun, outplayed, and outmaneuvered by those who see the world not as it should be, but as it is. So here's the real question: can you be good without being weak? Can you be moral without being blind? Can you navigate a ruthless world without becoming ruthless yourself? That's the challenge. Because the answer isn't to become a monster. The answer is to become dangerous but disciplined, and to understand power, not for the sake of domination, but for the sake of protecting what matters. Too often, good people reject power because they associate it with corruption. But power is neutral. It's a tool. And if you don't learn to wield it, someone else will use it against you. So the next time you find yourself shocked by how someone less ethical, less kind, or less thoughtful seems to be winning, don't just judge them. Study them. Learn how the world really works. Because if you want to change the world, you can't do it from the sidelines. You have to enter the game. And to enter the game, you need to understand the rules, even the dark ones. The predator's mindset. Why power favors the unapologetic. There's a reason apex predators don't apologize when they eat. They don't hesitate. They don't explain. They don't seek approval. They act. Because in nature, hesitation is death. And in human systems, whether business, politics, or even personal relationships, the same principle often applies. Power doesn't reward the hesitant. It rewards the unapologetic. The ones who act with clarity, assertiveness, and an almost uncomfortable indifference to how they're perceived. The predator's mindset isn't about cruelty for its own sake. It's about eliminating the internal friction that keeps most people stuck in limbo. Doubt, guilt, fear of what others will think. These are luxuries predators don't afford themselves. That's why they move faster, strike harder, and almost always rise higher. We live in a culture obsessed with approval, addicted to validation. We're taught to be nice, to be agreeable, to avoid conflict. But predators aren't concerned with niceness, they're concerned with results. And that's what makes them powerful. They're not weighed down by the emotional noise that paralyzes most people. They don't wait for consensus. They don't ask for permission. They don't check the temperature of the room before deciding what they believe. They act on instinct, analysis, strategy, and they trust themselves deeply, unshakably. That's the core of the predator's mindset, a total lack of internal fragmentation. The unapologetic don't mean they're heartless. It means they've made peace with the consequences of being bold. They know that standing firmly for something will always attract resistance. They know that being decisive will always be misunderstood by those who are still negotiating with themselves. And they don't flinch when that happens. They expect it. They plan for it. That's why they win. Because while others are waiting to be liked, they're already building, moving, taking territory physically, mentally, and emotionally. Think about the people you admire most, but not just the ones who inspire you, but the ones who intimidate you. There's a good chance they operate with this mindset. They don't shrink themselves to make others comfortable. They don't dilute their truth to avoid friction. And they certainly don't apologize for wanting more. That's not arrogance. That's clarity. And clarity is magnetic. The predator's mindset is built on clarity of purpose. They know what they want. They know what it costs. And they're willing to pay it. But here's the part most people miss. The unapologetic don't lack emotion, they master it. They don't let every fear, doubt, or insecurity derail them. They feel it, but they move anyway. That's why they're so effective. They're not fearless, they're fear-trained. And that makes them unstoppable in environments where others collapse under pressure. Because when you stop needing emotional permission to act, you become dangerous. Not in a destructive way, in a transformative way. Because you're no longer operating from the outside in. You're leading from the inside out. So ask yourself, where in your life are you still asking for permission? Where are you shrinking, hesitating, apologizing for your potential? And more importantly, why? Who told you that being powerful was wrong? Who convinced you that wanting more made you selfish? These are the chains that keep most people small, not lack of talent, not lack of opportunity, but a deep-seated belief that being unapologetically yourself is somehow a threat to others. But here's the truth, it is, and that's okay. Because your full power will always be too much for someone who's still dimming their own. That's not your problem. That's their journey. Your job is to stop waiting for universal approval and start acting from internal conviction. That's what the predator does. Not because they don't care, but because they've chosen to care about the right things. Not about being liked, but about being effective. Not about being accepted, but about being aligned. And let's be brutally honest, the world doesn't need more agreeable people. It needs more people who are willing to lead, even when it's uncomfortable. Who are willing to speak the truth, even when it's unpopular. Those who are willing to step into the arena, take the hits, and keep going not because they're ruthless, but because they're resolute. That's the real predator's mindset. Not cruelty, but courage. Not domination, but direction. And the ability to move through the world with such unapologetic clarity that you become a force of nature. Moral camouflage, how ruthless people hide behind good intentions. Here's a truth most people don't want to see. The most dangerous individuals are not the ones who look evil. They're the ones who look good. They smile. They speak in soft tones. They talk about values, community, and justice. They donate, volunteer, and post the right things online. But behind their polished image is something else entirely: strategy, calculation, ruthlessness hidden in plain sight. And it works, not because they're geniuses, but because most people are so hungry to believe in goodness that they never question the mask. This is what I call moral camouflage, the capacity to play by the rules of kindness on the surface while playing a cutthroat game underneath. Think about it. When was the last time someone rose to power by openly declaring their manipulations? That's not how the game is played. The truly ruthless understand that nothing disarms suspicion like virtue. But if they can wrap their ambition in the language of service, if they can make their self-interest look like sacrifice, they win twice. Once by advancing their agenda, and again by being applauded for it. They weaponize goodness itself. And the worst part, we reward them for it. Because we love the myth of the benevolent leader. We want to believe that the person who rises to the top did so with pure intentions. It makes us feel like the system isn't broken. It makes us feel safe. But let's strip away the illusion. Think about corporations that claim to care about the planet while exploiting natural resources. Politicians who preach justice while making backroom deals. Influencers who speak about mental health while secretly profiting from insecurity. The examples are endless, and they all follow the same formula: present virtue, practice vice. The duality is almost surgical, and it's effective because it feeds off one key flaw in human perception: we trust appearances. But moral camouflage isn't limited to public figures. You see it in workplaces, families, friend groups. The co-worker who pretends to support you but subtly undermines you. The family member who says they're just trying to help while controlling your every move. The friend who gives compliments laced with hidden envy. These people aren't monsters. They're simply playing a higher-level social game, one where ruthlessness wears a mask so convincing that even they might forget they're wearing it. So why do they do it? Because it works. Because being openly ruthless provokes resistance, but being morally camouflaged creates compliance. People don't fight back against what they believe is good. They surrender to it. They follow it. They defend it. And that's why this strategy is so powerful. It doesn't need to dominate, it convinces. It doesn't need to force, it invites. And in doing so, it exploits the very values we hold most sacred. Now here's the uncomfortable part. Many of us do this too. Maybe not on a grand scale, but in subtle ways. We tell ourselves we're giving advice to help, when really we want control. We say we're being honest, when really we're just venting unprocessed emotion. We present ourselves as kind and generous, but only when it benefits our image. This isn't an accusation, it's a mirror. Because if we don't see the moral camouflage in ourselves, we'll keep falling for it in others. And that's how we stay blind. So what do we do about it? We learn to look deeper. We stop judging people solely by what they say and start watching what they do. We ask, does their behavior match their words? Do they serve when no one is watching? Do they admit when they're wrong, or only when it's convenient? These questions are uncomfortable, but they're necessary. Because until we stop being seduced by appearances, we will continue to be ruled by those who've mastered the art of looking good while doing harm. And let me be clear, not everyone who presents themselves as good is hiding something. But the truly good don't need to perform goodness. They don't need applause. They move with quiet integrity, not because it benefits them, but because it defines them. The difference is subtle, but it's everything. Here's the deeper question: are you willing to see the world as it actually is, even if it shatters your illusions? Because that's what it takes to navigate a world where ruthlessness wears a halo. It takes discernment. It takes watching actions over words. And it takes the courage to acknowledge that sometimes goodness is just the costume. The real game is happening behind the curtain, becoming a moral weapon. How to win without losing your soul. If you've followed this far, you already know the truth. The world often rewards ruthlessness, not righteousness. But here's the question that really matters now: can you win without becoming like them? Can you navigate a world that favors predators without becoming one yourself? Can you protect your values while still becoming powerful? The answer isn't just yes, it's necessary. Because if good people continue to avoid power, only the ruthless will wield it. And that's how darkness spreads, not just through evil, but through the absence of good that knows how to win. To become a moral weapon, you need to stop thinking of goodness as weakness. That's the first shift. Too many people confuse kindness with softness, compassion with compliance, humility with submission. But true morality isn't fragile. It's fierce. It's the strength to do what's right even when it costs you. It's the courage to speak the truth even when it's unpopular. It's the discipline to act with integrity even when no one is watching. And when you combine that kind of character with strategic thinking, emotional resilience, and the will to act, you become unstoppable. Not because you're ruthless, but because you're ruthless about protecting what matters. The key is integration. Most people split themselves in two. They're either good or strong, kind or assertive, moral or strategic. But the real power comes when you stop choosing between the two, when you unify the sword and the spirit. When you stop apologizing for being both compassionate and competitive, both honest and ambitious. Because that's what scares the truly ruthless: someone who can't be manipulated through guilt, someone who knows how the game works but chooses to play it consciously. That's what makes you a moral weapon. You are fully awake, fully capable, and fully aligned. But let me be clear, this path is not easy. In fact, it's harder than being ruthless or naive. It requires constant self-awareness. You have to ask yourself, am I still serving truth? Or have I started serving my own ego under the mask of virtue? You have to watch yourself closely, because power has gravity. It pulls on your identity. It tempts you to believe that effectiveness justifies anything, that the end always justifies the means. But it doesn't. Because if you win the world and lose yourself, you haven't really won. You've just become another player in a broken system. So how do you stay grounded? You build a code, or a personal philosophy, not a list of rules, but a set of non-negotiables, principles that you return to no matter how chaotic the world becomes. For some, that code is honesty. For others, it's loyalty, or justice, or the protection of the vulnerable. Whatever it is, it must be real, not performative. Not for praise, but for you. Your code is your compass. It's what keeps your strategy from turning into manipulation. It's what keeps your ambition from becoming greed. It's what makes you dangerous not to the innocent, but to the corrupt. And here's the paradox. When you become a moral weapon, people will misread you. Some will call you cold because you're clear. Some will call you arrogant because you refuse to shrink. Some will call you calculating because you're strategic. Let them, because your life is not a PR campaign, it's a mission. You're not here to be liked. You're here to build, to protect, to lead, to elevate. And if you do that well, you will disturb people who benefit from confusion and weakness. That's the cost of clarity. That's the price of power with purpose. So let me ask you one final question. What would your life look like if you stopped apologizing for your strength and started using it to serve truth? What if you stopped hiding your power behind politeness and started wielding it with precision and integrity? What if you became the kind of person who doesn't just survive in a ruthless world, but reshapes it through presence, through principle, through action? That's what the world needs now. Not more noise, not more virtue signaling, not more people who mean well but do nothing. It needs moral weapons, people who are both kind and clear, or humble and strategic, loving and lethal in the defense of what is right. Because in the end, the ruthless may win battles, but only the conscious win wars that matter.